to you. Make that shot when I'm kneeling before him. All about you. Will you be embarrassed? Will your mom feel? What did I suggest that you? I'm supposed to be greeting, but it's Corona time, so what do I do right now? You're greeting. You're going to cut it and say something. Actually, you're like the civil. You're just there to leave a child. There are assumptions about culture and assumptions about gender. I think that in Buganda, gender works along with age. So a younger boy, a younger girl performs these notions of respectability and honor differently to an older girl and an older boy. I know that men, grown up, I was going to say grown ups, but grown up men in Buganda would not just kneel, they'd prostrate themselves before the king, the Kabaka of Buganda. Okay? And so while we're talking gender, let us not forget class. The Kabaka is the ruler, the traditional, the customary, the cultural ruler of Buganda. Men prostrate themselves before him. Women will kneel before the Kabaka, right? And so to take Buganda or Chiganda culture and reduce it to the act of a young boy watching his sister growing up kneeling is to diminish a huge wide culture into very little. So if we want to talk about kneeling down as gendered practice, we should do so respectfully and knowledgeably. Visit the Baganda, visit what poor Baganda do. I've seen poor Baganda women, much older than their sons, kneeling down before their sons. I've also seen today in modern Kampala, modern Masaka, modern Buganda, women who refuse because of notions from the West about feminism and being empowered, refuse entirely to kneel. I have knelt on occasion. I have refused to kneel on occasion. Sometimes I've knelt out of compulsion. I'm at a ceremony. And as ceremonial practice, we kneel, Kukwanjula, at the introduction ceremony. It is ceremonial. It is part of the rituals and the rites that we do as Baganda. Kneeling is a position of power. If you want to get something from a man, kneel down. We know that. And women can be manipulative on those knees. We have got so much from men who are gullible. Does it make us less? I think it makes us creative creatures who can use notions of disempowerment to empower ourselves. I can perform at being a good girl, at being a respectable woman. By kneeling, does it make me respectable? No. Does it make me a less being? I think it depends on who is interpreting kneeling as an action that diminishes or degenerates or takes away from a person. It could be one of the most respectful, one of the most defying acts.
Stella,
yes. Both genders have on occasion in Buganda, right until today, knelt, right? For each other, man to man, man to woman, woman to man. Although I think what critics, particularly those who position themselves as feminist critics, tend to do, also outsiders of Chiganda culture, what they tend to do is to say, it's just the young girls kneeling down for the men. It's just the women kneeling down for the men. Actually, I'm saying to you, if they removed their feminist glasses and they removed their outsider glasses, you're not a Muganda, they would be able to see other men kneeling down for women, right? And so I'm saying it's an othering. It's a type of othering. Why are they othering Baganda and any other culture that kneels, right? Why don't they take the entire context, the spectrum of occasions when Baganda kneel? Why don't they do a proper, careful analysis of when gender is at play? I think we should criticize, as a feminist, we should criticize those moments when one is forced to kneel simply because they are women. As I've said, culture changes. Very many of us don't kneel anymore. We don't have time to go to school and also kneel down. We don't have time to run big businesses and kneel down. We don't have time to drive cranes. What are they called, cranes? These huge caterpillars. Be engineers, building up a building and kneel down because we have moved on. Culture has evolved. Does it make us disrespectful? No. However, if a woman who chooses not to kneel chooses to kneel down, it doesn't take anything away from her. If anything, it reveals how in touch with her culture she is, with the ethos of her people she is, and how liberated she is to choose to kneel and not to kneel. I'm a Uganda child, and I'm saying no. Urban Baganda girls grow up differently. Those of us who live in Uganda grow up with a number of other ethnic groups, some of who kneel, some of who don't, right? When we go to school, some schools reward kneeling, other schools don't. Some schools are so westernized, you're taught it's dirty. Why do you do it? Others, very early in school, you find young girls saying, in my culture, we hug to greet, we don't kneel. Why are you kneeling down? And so interaction with other cultures as a child is growing up begins to introduce questions. Why do I have to do that? Some of us, out of rebellion, have refused to kneel as children, and we've been punished. I think the element of coercion, coercing young girls to kneel before whoever, whether man or woman, is what must be questioned. The coercive element, the forceful element, punishing a young girl who refuses, who chooses not to kneel, for whatever reason. That is what must be questioned. And young girls who kneel out of choice must be rewarded. I think that we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are those of us who feel that kneeling is in fact utilizing our cultures, our customs, to empower ourselves, often to get things we would never have gotten if we didn't kneel, right? And I think for me that it's very good, it was very good upbringing, it was very good, it was a good way to teach me how to work with men, how to manipulate the male race, male humans, particularly the Baganda. If I want anything from a man, and the man is not giving it quickly, I will buy into the idea that by being on my knees, I'm subscribing to the idea that he's greater than I am. It eases life, it's very manipulative, I get what I want, and on my knees, even if I'm very disrespectful and in my head I'm thinking everything negative and critical about him, I will get what I want. Does it make me manipulative? Yes. Does it make me wise? Totally. Is it about subjugation? No, it's very empowering. On my knees, I have gotten things from men simply because I knelt down and I played with their bankrupt, coercive upbringing. They thought I was a good little girl. And then I went away and did what bad women do. So I don't front my wifeness before I front my whole being. I think that we are humans first. Before we are wives or mothers or sisters, we are humans first, right? To be a wife means that one must be coupled always, and then that means they will silence those of us who are either unmarried or widowed or divorced or single or separated. I think that I am among the women who resist the idea that to run for elective politics, to run in the elections, a woman must have a man besides her. Yet many men run as single candidates without marital status. It's not even asked about. And so I think that there is a class of women such as the minister you talk about, and for them it's important. We respect that for them, but for many of us who insist on being humans first, or mothers first, or whatever else first, the idea of defining ourselves as wife, which means you get position relative to a man, makes no sense. What happens to me who is without husband? How then do I navigate the world? Why is that relationship more important than daughter? Daughter of Harriet or daughter to Joseph? Why is it more important than Stella, the human rights activist, or Ruth, the minister of health, or Ruth, the medical doctor? I don't know. But I think that there are women for whom their wifeness, wifeship, wifety serves a particular purpose. It does not serve the same for all of us. And it doesn't mean that they necessarily are better or ahead or more progressive than those of us who respect marriage but do not necessarily take it as the norm for all of humans. Quickly, I want to say, as a Muganda woman who was introduced into labia elongation much later in life, it is one of the best things that happened to me. The pleasure that a woman and her man can achieve from elongated labia is perhaps only met in heaven. Okay, the orgasm one gets from the stimulation of elongated labia has no equal. It has no match. And those who don't know should not speak for us. Having said that, I want to say that WHO at one time classified labia elongation alongside infibulation, which is the digging out of the clitoris with a sharpened tool, or female genital mutilation, or even labia sewing, okay, part of infibulation. After a long protracted contestation by African feminists, some of whom practice labia elongation was declassified from being a harmful traditional practice, okay? In the WHO, whatever they are called, they have a classification of traditional harmful practices. And I want to celebrate WHO as a woman who comes from a culture of people who pull, who elongate their labia. So your question about young girls growing up from as early as primary school and being forced to pull, that is the problem. When a young girl cannot choose for herself to do it or not to do it, that is the problem. When there is no consent, when a young woman cannot consent before a teacher or an aunt to pull, that is the problem. Where it is coercive, some girls are beaten, go and pull each other, go to the bathrooms and pull. Where young girls are punished for refusing to do it, that is the problem. But when an adult or another, an 18-year-old decides, I'm going to pull my labia for herself, does it in her time, chooses to bear the pain or chooses to do alternative routes that are not painful. It doesn't have to be painful. It is not always painful. When a lover pulls the labia of his lover, what is the problem in that? And so I think that for me, the problem is when labia elongation is made mandatory. All girls, no one explains why they're doing it. I think that those myths should be put aside. Allow girls to grow until the age of consent. We have an age of consent in our constitution, 18, okay? If girls want to pull their labia, why not? Like I said, for me, some of the greatest pleasure I've received is from sexual intercourse via my labia. And I think that that prerogative of pleasure should not be taken away from Baganda women. Baganda young girls cannot consent for themselves. Their parents should not make these decisions from themselves. Aunts should not make these decisions for the young girls. The young girls should be allowed to mature. Their labia will still grow. And the practice can be reintroduced then. After all, culture, as I said, is not fixed. It changes. So now it can change with consent. Allow young girls to give their consent, pull their labia if they want, go and get an orgasm. The best orgasms in the world come from kachabali, which is given through labia elongation. Those who don't know should ask Baganda. Don't ask Baganda about kneeling. Ask Baganda about kachabali. I think that education, school, formal education, but also community sensitization and awareness, creating awareness of the equal value of men and women, boys and girls, is also important. Village education, I don't know how this is done, giving positive role models that are women who've made it, because many times we see role models as men. And often the women are the ones that are denigrated, right? Women are thanked for being good mothers, as if that's all we can do. But having positive role models who are women, who are empowered and emancipated and maybe have made it in life, is another way we can bash culture, which says, women stay in the kitchen and they cook and peel and have sex with daddy to get babies. How else apart from education? I think that the women's movement has made a lot of strides. The problem is we don't see how they infiltrate these everyday normative notions of gender, that daddy is better than mommy, or my husband is more important than I am to his clan. But the women's rights movement must, in fact, I think it's a demand on the women's rights movement, the feminist movements in Uganda, in Africa, to find innovative ways of tackling these notions within culture and custom that insist on pushing women to the margins and men to the center. That world is way here. It's already come. I think that the insistence on the patriarchal world, the insistence on finding patriarchy where we have bashed it, is problematic on its own. There are very many men who are vulnerable. There are very many feminist men in Buganda. There are very many men who are upholding gender equity. And I think that to speak as if these men don't exist is to undo the work we've been doing for decades, since the 1940s, perhaps. I think that there remain a few small customary patriarchal practices and norms, but we are advancing. We are advancing. My thoughts are that that statement of looking forward to a Uganda or Buganda where men are feminist, are vulnerable, are gender aware, it's kind of like history. We're already there. Our men are making strides. They are not yet necessarily there. Buganda is not yet there, but we're coming along. We've come a long way. So one should not say to us we are still barbaric. We are not.